Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here. It's interesting. I said this yesterday. American people, if they watch this, they would get very frustrated. And as my friend Mr. Larson said, they get frustrated, but it's not because we're talking about ACE. They get frustrated because we're talking at each other instead of listening. And that's the problem. We need to listen to our witnesses. We need to listen to the people we represent. So I'm going to go back. Employers, I'm glad that Mr. Kelly got us back on track as to what the hearing was about. You know, employers cover, this per the CBO, 63% of health care through employer-sponsored plan. You guys would agree with that, right?
The worker is paying for that because it's part of the worker's overall compensation.
I understand.
Employers,
but employers are covering.
It's part of, when an employer hires someone, the cost of their overall compensation is
We're going to get to that.
calculated.
We're going to get to that. So employers, in fact, cover 155 million people through employer-sponsored health care. I think, Mr. Antos, you said yes to that. So I go back in the district and I talk to my employers. I talk to my employers too. You know what my employees say? They say, I don't want the responsibility of trying to find my own health care. It's complicated. I like the idea of an employer covering my health insurance. And by the way, I've hired many employees, and you know what they say? I want a good wage. And you hire them for a good wage, and then you give them health insurance. So the health insurance doesn't stop me from paying them a good wage. You guys are saying that, you know, it's reducing. They don't come in there saying, you know, I'm only going to work for this and you should pay me more because of health insurance. Most of them love that we're covering health insurance. So they say to me, when I talk to the employees, we don't want to be burdened with trying to select. We like the idea of the employer doing this. We like the idea of the employer covering everything. We like the idea of being part of a bigger plan because I can't do it on my own. That's the other thing they say. Then I go to the employers and I ask them, and you know what they say to me? Congressman, that big wet blanket the government keeps throwing on top of us, you're raising our costs for health insurance. You're raising our costs, which is shown for the last couple of years with the Affordable Care Act and other ways. And now you want to cap it and cut it at the top. You want to hurt us again. It's not fair to the employer. It's not fair to the employee. We have to go back to what the basis is. If we went to those 63% and asked them, are they happy they're covered with health insurance? They would say, that, I bet you they are happy they're covered with health insurance. So here's my concern. We know health care costs are going up. We want to capitate it and say, Mr. Employer, you can't pay it. You can pay it, but anything above that, it's going to be a tax increase to you because we're not going to have it as a deduction. That's a problem. No. So the only way, in my estimation, and this is what drives me crazy, and I'm now come to you, Mr. Roy, you keep saying an employer-sponsored plan doesn't give the employee choice. But I would ask you this. Aren't there employer-sponsored plans that give and could give employees a choice over their health care decisions, if structured properly?
So there's a couple of points to make in response to that. The first is that
nobody's
talking about tax increases. People are talking about letting patients control those dollars themselves, increasing their take-home pay.
I know that, but
letting
let's
them
get back to it.
decide what they want to fund. On the issue of choice for health insurance plans,
if the plan is structured properly,
employers can decide whether to offer one plan or two plans or three plans, but shouldn't workers have the choice to choose between their employer-sponsored plan and 100 different plans that are out there independent of their employer?
They can do that right now. They can do that right now.
It's much harder for them to do that because the inequities in the tax code make that much more expensive.
They can do that right now, but I guarantee if you talk to the employees, see, this is what happens. The American people get frustrated with us in Congress because they want us to listen to them. They don't want to make those decisions. They like the idea of selecting a plan that their employer gives them. And they definitely don't want to have somebody come to us and say, this is what we think is best for you. They know what's best for them. They want us to represent them. That's what's so frustrating. But that's what's great about these hearings, because I do like to hear some of your thoughts, and I've listened. The next question I have, Mr. Antos, will more people lose their employer-sponsored plan if we cap the employer exclusion?
More people will move off of employer-sponsored plan. But let me clarify something that both you and Mr. Kelly said that I believe is incorrect, which is that I don't think anybody's proposing that the employer's ability to take off their top line legitimate cost of doing business, which includes their contributions to all forms of compensation for employees. Nobody's talking about capping that or eliminating that in any way. So what we're talking about is limiting what the employee can essentially exclude from his income taxes, but not it's not going to affect the employer.
That's even worse. Now you're going to add taxes to the employee. Again, if the American people hear what you just said, they're going to be really upset. I yield back.
Time is expired.